In exceptional economic times, we have long been clear that we require an exceptional and rapid response. So we in Britain have taken action to reform our Financial Services Authority, to step up national regulatory efforts. The Turner report that was published in Britain set out a wide range of proposals, many of which we've already turned into action for better supervision of the financial system. But as everybody knows, this economic downturn is global. It also needs global action. For many months, we have said that we need to look at putting in place a new international framework for regulation of the global flows of finance based on international cooperation and European cooperation. So we have pressed for greater action at a global level and at a European level. Indeed, we set out a radical and challenging programme of work when we met in the G20 in London and agreed summit conclusions. Europe has to play its part in implementing the G20 summit conclusions. The Rossier report brought forward a number of proposals which we discussed at the last European Council. There has been further work since then. At the European Summit, our discussion must set out the principles for the future, and we must deliver what the world agreed was needed urgently when we met at the G20 Summit. Britain therefore supports proposals which will help prevent a repeat of the crisis on the scale we have seen and are seeing today. First, I've called for some time for better early warning systems. So I support the creation of a new European Systemic Risk Council to provide strengthened macroprudential early warning. Better early warning might have prevented some of the problems we have seen, including the collapse of some of the world's major international banks, as well as the problems for other countries, such as Britain had with financial instability in Iceland. Second, because we have a single market in financial services in Europe, it is right that we already have common regulation, but we need to do more to enforce these common rules and to improve the coordination, the quality and consistency of supervision across Europe. That's why I welcome the proposals today for a strengthened and more detailed set of European rules. This is something that the Turner Review in Britain itself suggested and is now being brought into implementation. It is also in Britain's interest that we have improved cross-border supervision of financial institutions across Europe. London is Europe and the world's financial centre. 420 financial institutions have operations in London. Cross-border investments between the United Kingdom and the rest of Europe amount to over €250 billion every year. Better early warning, better cooperation on supervision, better enforcement of rules is in our interest. Now, European action must be practical and it must be effective. It is only logical that where a supervisory decision would have an impact on the taxpayer, that decision should be for the relevant national authority. But as I say, better working at a European level, harmonised rules, early warning, increased coordination of supervision are things that we support and want to see implemented and from which Britain, that's the British people, the city and British taxpayers, all stand to benefit. Now, these are the principles we want to agree with our European partners today and tomorrow. These are the principles that meet the commitments that were made at the G20 summit in London. And I want to stress today that these are the commitments that are necessary to ensure a better financial system, not just in Europe, but one that will be effective in all parts of the world. Happy to answer any questions.
We'll take just a handful of questions. Adam Bolton.
Robert, two quick questions, if I may. One is, are you satisfied by Sir Fred Goodwin's decision to pay back some of his pension, I think worth about £4.5 million, although he will still get the bulk of his payoff? And secondly, have you received this letter from the Taoiseach, and are you able to give him the assurances he asked for?
Britain has obviously wants to see a solution to the problems that happened in Ireland. We note the Irish concerns in the letter that has just been received. I think the important thing, however, for everybody is that we want to make sure that we do the right thing by Ireland and by Europe. And I want to ensure, of course, that the Lisbon Treaty, as it affects Britain, will not be changed in any way. Fred Goodwin, I think it was right that he paid back this sum of money. This was the discretionary element that was agreed by the Royal Bank of Scotland before he left. I think for the future, it is really important now that we have proper systems of bonus and reward that reflect not short-term deals, but reflect long-term success. And I think it's very important in this area, as in other areas, that the systems on which these rewards are based are far more transparent and open to the public than they've been in the past.
George Parker.
Can I ask a specific question about the financial regulations? Is it a bottom line for you that the Systemic Risk Council should not be chaired on a permanent basis by the President of the European Central Bank? And just in general terms, are you worried that there's a sort of a mood flow against Anglo-Saxon capitalism, if you like, and particularly against hedge funds and private equity, and you might have to fight back against that at this summit?
Well, I think in a way it's the other way around. There is a mood flow in favour of implementing very quickly the decisions of the G20 that were made in London. All of us agreed that we had to have rules that were common. All of us agreed that there had to be a system of audit so that countries that didn't obey the rules had to show what they were doing and be subject to criticism and to supervision. And all of us have agreed that we need better cross-border supervision. So the three elements of the European proposals that are coming up are essentially to implement the principles of the G20 in London. As far as the presidency or the chairmanship of this body, that is for further discussion. I think that is less important than the issue for me that is important, and that is that we have common rules, we set supervisory standards, everybody follows that, and I believe that London benefits from that, particularly so since we have so many banks from other countries operating in Britain, and we want to be in a position to make sure that they're operating in a way that is satisfactory. I believe if you look at, for example, the Iceland crisis, one of the problems was that we did not have enough information that was being supplied to any regulatory authority, and we were not in a position to know just how serious the Icelandic problem was. And it was because of that that I think things have been so difficult for Iceland in the present and may still be in the future. We need a better system, but I think the principles of the system matter more than the individuals. But of course, we will try to sort out how we can deal with the organisation of the institution as well.
Andy Rice.
Prime Minister, could you explain why you have apparently changed your mind about the way the inquiry on Iraq should be conducted since Monday, and would you now like to see the bulk of the evidence taken in public?
What I said on Monday is that Sir John Chilcot was going to consult the chairman of select committees in the House of Commons and the different political parties in the House. And what I opened up on Monday was a process of consultation about how best the Chilcot inquiry, but indeed it's an inquiry involving more people who are on the committee, would proceed. And as you may know, I wrote to Sir John Chilcot. I talked to him on Wednesday, and I've written to him in some detail. I hope you now have the letter, and suggested to him that not only should he meet the leaders of the different political parties and the chairman of the select committees and hear what they had to say about how we could have an inquiry that was the most effective and efficient, but at the same time I asked whether it would be possible that they could take evidence by oath. I asked him to look at this major concern that I have, that I've also mentioned before, that families of those who died in Iraq and those who were injured in Iraq will have points that they wish to make to the inquiry, and perhaps Sir John and his team would consider having an open session with them, but depending on the wishes of the families, something in private or in public, depending on the family views on that. And I also said to him that I thought that he should have an open session where he explained in greater depth the significant scope and breadth of his inquiry. So this is us fulfilling what we said on Monday, that we were going to talk to the leaders of the other parties, we're going to talk to the chairman of other committees in the House of Commons, and we're going to look at how the different details which have to be filled in about how the inquiry will operate will actually work. I'm in favour of openness, as you know, and transparency. We've got to also balance that with the needs of national security. As I said on Monday, that the needs of national security, and particularly the desire that people will be able to give all the information that they want to give to the inquiry, and at the same time that we will be able to give all the papers that we want to the inquiry, depends on a level of confidentiality also being protected.
Last question, Mardell. Thank you.
Thank you. Two, if I may.
Does everybody get two questions now? There's other people that want to ask questions.
We'll let
another two in.
Why, in your expenses, are some details of a Sky receipt blanked out? And on the substance of today's summit, if you insist on liability, no liability without responsibility, doesn't that turn the watchdog into something toothless? Because they won't be able to say, you must rescue this bank.
Well, first of all, my expenses were published some time ago. And that particular receipt and the name of the company from which the product was bought was published. I didn't choose to redact that, and I don't quite understand all the rules that have been applied by the House of Commons itself in doing so. My principle in this is the maximum transparency. It's got to be consistent, of course, with security, but I think people have got to be as transparent as possible, and I think the public wants the transparency, not just now, but the transparency that we will have and are demanding with the new regulations and rules we're having for the future. But I repeat, my receipt in this case has been published a long time ago, and I made no request for it to be redacted at all. The other issue you're raising about regulation and supervision, look, the principles are these. First of all, we need common rules. We need it across the world, but of course we need it in Europe. Secondly, we need a system of audit so that people are meeting these rules. And thirdly, we need mechanisms by which there's cross-border supervision. Most of the crises that have hit our country are as a result of problems that started in the banking operations of these banks in other countries. So we need cross-border supervision, and that is something that is going to be established by these rules. But of course, at the end of the day, it is the national authority that will have to take the financial responsibility for dealing with the problems of an individual bank or an individual company. And when we had to take action with Royal Bank of Scotland or take action with the Lloyds TSB or Northern Rock, it was our money, public money, British public money, that had to be used to do so. And that is why the decision about any fiscal action has got to be one that is taken, in my view, by the authority that has the resources to enable them to do so, and that is the national government. And I think people understand that. It was what was agreed at ECOFIN only a few days ago. People understand that where there is a fiscal responsibility, then the national government has got to make that final decision. So I think you'll find that the changes that we are proposing and the changes that we agree create the international regulation that is necessary, a far better supervisory framework of rules, better audit than we've had in the past, cross-border supervision, but of course the fiscal authority in the case of Britain is Britain, and we have got to, as we've had to do, take responsibility when banks have needed to be rescued in different ways. So that is the position that we have, and I believe that is the common sense position that most people will want to support. I said I would take two more questions, but just one question each. Yeah.
Prime Minister Ben Nimmo from the German press agency DPA. What's your reaction on the United States financial regulation plans, and in particular, does that leave the EU somewhat losing the initiative? Thank you.
Well, I think we're all implementing the G20 conclusions. And look, if you look at what's happened to the world economy since April, then you've seen countries act individually to implement the G20 decisions, and that has given greater confidence to the markets. And I believe that the American authorities, when they came to the G20, said that they were going to implement a new system of financial supervision. They said that they were going to bring into being a plan for dealing with the capitalisation and the impaired assets of the banks. And they said they were going to continue with the fiscal stimulus that has been one of the means by which the American economy has started to do better. So every country, Europe as a whole, Britain itself with our financial supervision proposals, and of course America, are now implementing a common set of guidelines, not in exactly the same way, because every country has different facets, and every country has different traditions, and every country has different institutions that they start from, but everybody is trying to get to a common set of rules with a proper system of audit, with a better form of cross-border supervision. And I believe if this year has been the year that we sort out this problem of international financial supervision in a global economy where finance can flow freely, but we haven't had proper supervision, then it will be a major step forward for the world economy.
Take one more question.
Yeah.
The Financial Times again.
Deutschland. Yeah. I was wondering on the binding mediating powers of the new European supervisory body. You insist very heavily on the fact that it's the national authorities that take decisions that might have consequences for the budgets. Is that sort of a red line, or is there some room of for compromise?
Well look, that was a decision, if I may say so, at the European Finance Ministers meeting a few days ago. So that is a position that every country agreed. I think it's very important to recognise that if Iceland had been part of this agreement and had been told by the regulatory authority that they had to do something, but Europe as a whole had to bail the whole of Iceland out, it would have been a very difficult position because Europe as a whole does not have the funds that would enable it to do that. It's only national governments that have the funds that are necessary to deal with the sort of problems that we've had to deal with in the banking system. Now, ECOFIN made that decision, so that's all the European finance ministers. It said that fiscal consequences are a matter and decisions are a matter for national governments, and I believe that is the position that people will want to continue to follow. Okay, thank you all very much.